At what age did you first become a millionaire?
Uh, 37, about 3 years ago. I learned a lot about IRA investing, started maxing out the IRA accounts. And then when I had a 401k again at my job, I started maxing that out as well. So along with HSA. So I mean, that's been probably for the last 7 or 8 years been one of the consistent investing goals that I've had is to max out all of those accounts for max out the IRAs for me and my wife. If you do that now, that gets you to probably over $40,000 a year, close to $45,000 a year just in investments. And, a lot of years are 10 to 20% growth. And so it's just added up over time.
You mentioned to me before we hit record that you have 5 kids from ages 3 to age 13. How have you balanced those two goals of building wealth while also spending money on the things that are important to provide a good family life? Coulson, thanks for joining me today.
Of course, happy to be here. Thank you, Jackson.
Yeah, we got started talking a little bit before I hit record, and I'm excited to dive into more of the details of your story. So, give me an idea of how did you first get started building wealth?
Really, it was just a kind of a slow and steady process. I'm a CPA by profession. I started my career at Deloitte as a tax accountant, and since then I've worked in tax and as a controller for several businesses. And I advanced throughout my career doing that. I've just focused on saving and investing and living below our means, and that's over time really worked out to grow, our retirement accounts and so on. And so I think that that more than anything is where we found success in, um, you know, getting to where we are now.
Gotcha. So, following more of the traditional path of working a W 2 style income all the way through.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I've noticed this trend with, all of the different people that I've spoken with that are millionaires is that whether they work in a financial field or not, they're always financially educated. You mentioned you're a CPA, so obviously well educated in the finance space. Was that something that you grew up with, or how did you first develop that interest in money and finances?
Yeah. That's a good question. So um, I didn't necessarily, I mean, my parents directly weren't, didn't necessarily teach me, um, a lot of the details, but I think they gave me a good foundation. I had a kind of a lawn mowing business as a kid and teenager. My dad would help me with it at times and really taught me. I mean, I think it taught me work ethic more than anything, but words of work. But that's really where my interest in accounting and business started, was like kind of running a small business on my own and really stopping and thinking about it. How do all these other businesses make money? Because I realized, okay, there's a lot of costs that go into this, and you can make money to a certain degree, but sometimes it didn't make sense to me. And now, looking back on it, 30 years later, it's, in some cases, some of those businesses weren't making money probably. And it's kind of, some businesses make more money than others. Some industries are better than others, and learning that. I had some good guidance as well from family, extended family. I have some cousins and, aunt and uncle that are CPAs. So I always enjoyed math and kind of that problem solving aspect of it, and very detail oriented. So it just was a career. When I graduated from high school, and I, on the program, put where I was going to school and what I was going to study. I said, I'm going to BYU. I'm going to study accounting. And that's what I did. I never really wavered from that, even though I didn't necessarily know that much about accounting to begin with. I knew it was kind of in line with my skill set and interests, and it just happened to work out. And it's been, yeah, I mean, I think that more than anything is what's gotten me where I am today.
That's cool. Yeah, BYU has a great accounting program. My sister went through the accounting program at BYU and ended up getting a great job working in tax as well. So
Awesome.
definitely a proven track record there if that's the career you want to pursue.
Very good.
So you got your start, you got your degree in accounting, you became a CPA, you started working at Deloitte. And I know quite a few accountants, and I would say the majority of them are relatively conservative with their financial approach. And so I'm curious to know, as you started your career, what did your investing strategy look like for you, and how did you think about setting aside money and starting to build wealth?
Yeah. And so I was hesitant to start and invest, even hesitant to start with a 401k when I first started my job. I think it took me about 2 years. I had an experience, going back a few years before that. I had an experience with the Great Recession, the financial crisis, where I had a small amount of money invested in a covered out ESA account. And I think I had $500 in GM stock. If you recall, GM went bankrupt. I lost all my
Mhm.
money at that investment. I learned some really valuable lessons, probably paid off more than, the $500 and understanding the risks of investing in single stocks. But then I eventually got to a point where I realized, okay, I need to save for retirement. It's going to grow over time. And so I probably 2 years in started investing and, making sure I was getting at least the employer match on my 401k, and
Mhm.
really, haven't looked back since. I think investing in broad ETFs, index funds, that follow the S&P 500 or follow the total stock market, or that's really where I've tended to be. So in the scheme of being conservative, I guess you would say I'm conservative in that nature. Stocks are still riskier than other investments. We've just had probably a pretty good stock market run, over the course of my investing horizon. So it's worked out pretty well for me so far.
Okay, so mostly, it started off as single stocks and then shifting more into index funds and ETFs, and it sounds like that's mostly been through a 401k. Are there any other types of investment accounts that you've leveraged as well along the way, or
Yeah.
mostly your workplace plan?
Yeah. So, I mean, Deloitte, it was, probably just being early in my career. We bought a house after my first year. Had several kids along the way, trying to pay for vehicles outright, not take out car loans and things like that. So there wasn't a ton of margin until I left Deloitte and, moved into a job that was a little bit better paying, where for, a period, I didn't have a 401k as I was easing into that new job. At that point, rolled my Deloitte 401k into an IRA and I learned a lot about IRA investing, started maxing out the IRA accounts. And then when I had a 401k again at my job, I started maxing that out as well. So, along with HSA. So, I mean, that's been probably for the last 7 or 8 years been one of the consistent investing goals that I've had, is to max out all of those accounts, max out the IRAs for me and my wife, and do max out the 401k, max out the HSA. I mean, that, if you do that now, that gets you to probably over $40,000 a year, close to $45,000 a year just in investments. And, a lot of years are 10 to 20% growth. And so it's just added up over time. You're getting employer matches on top of that too. And so can be another 3 or 4% that's also going in there to grow. And so all of that together is really, a lot of what I've done.
Coulson is a perfect example of how anyone in America has the opportunity to build wealth. If you notice in his story, there are some very simple yet effective strategies he's used to become a millionaire. And he mentioned a couple of those: capturing his company match in his 401k plan and maxing out IRA accounts for him and his wife, and then also a health savings account. This is truly a proven method that you can use to get to millionaire status by the time you're 40. It's just using the math of the power of compounding and the power of the US stock market to your advantage. And literally anyone in America can take advantage of this. So if you're in that situation where maybe you're busy raising a family, you're working a W 2 job, and you're not necessarily looking for something flashy, but you are looking to get ahead financially, you should definitely check out the Investor Blueprint. The Investor Blueprint is an online course that I built that will teach you the exact principles of growing your wealth through stock market investing in tax advantaged accounts. It gives you everything you need to copy the strategy that Colson is describing in this episode. So if you want to check it out, click on the link in the description below. It'll take you right to my website, jacksonlarimer.com, where you can purchase the Investor Blueprint and really dive deeper into this strategy.
On top of that, we do have a rental property now. It's our first home that we bought when I started my career. We kept it. We moved about a half mile away, and so we manage that rental ourselves. We've done it for around 2 years, and so far it's been a pretty good experience. The property's appreciated quite a bit, and so and we've been paying down the mortgage on it, at a really good interest rate. And so it's something that, it's cash flowing quite well. And that's been nice for us. I mean, something that I looked a little bit, tried to see if there was another property to by and haven't really found anything good on the market currently, but that's something that I'd like to get involved in more down the road.
You and me are in the same boat there. So when my wife and I first got married, we bought a house in Raleigh, North Carolina, lived in it for about 3 years, and then last year we moved, and so we decided to keep it and convert it into a rental property as well. I would love to self-manage it, but we moved across the country. We're in Arkansas now, and so it's kinda hard to self-manage a property in a different state, so we have a property manager.
Yeah, yeah, we're less than a mile away from the house, so we drive by it, even just some passing, just to see how things are going. But yeah, I've had good tenants, so I know that I've worked for one of my jobs after Deloitte was at a real estate company, so I know the ups and downs of real estate and potential risks there, and a lot of unexpected costs at times. But so far, we've been relatively lucky, I guess, relatively blessed with how it's gone so far.
Someone that's in a similar situation where maybe they're either looking to buy a rental property or they're looking at doing the same thing you did where you move out to a different house and convert your old house into a rental. What would be your number one piece of advice for them to make that a success?
I mean, I think really it was just I I had a good runway where, you know, the we were in that first house for 10 years. And so we didn't really we weren't overly ambitious, I guess, in buying a bigger, more expensive house too soon. I think that we would have been really stretched because, when we bought our second house, the interest rate is more than double what the interest rate was on our first house. And so, but we'd had a lot of time where we'd had a very low mortgage payment. We've been making payments on that consistently, and really just with career growth, been able to save and invest a lot of money. And so getting that down payment and for that second house was easy. I mean, one of my proudest accomplishments is that we were able to do that without, buy a second house without having to sell the first house and not really being too, you know, cash poor in the process. So I think it's just I would recommend doing it, but you don't have to necessarily rush into it. Like I said, I think it was over 10 years before we bought that second property, and the house we're in now, I don't see us moving out of it anytime soon. So I think now the next step would be to, if buy another real estate, it wouldn't be one for us to move into, but just one that would be a kind of profitable rental property, or even a twoplex or fourplex or something a little bit bigger. But just waiting for the right time in the market for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually want to add a little bit of my personal perspective to this as well of what it's like going from living in a house to converting it to a rental. And when you live in a house, you start to create some sentimental attachment to it. And for example, our house in Raleigh, my wife and I just love like the color blue. It's very calming color. And so we picked like this really nice light blue color called Teensy Bubbles. And we painted our almost our whole house teensy bubbles when we moved in. And then I remember we were meeting with property managers, and I asked the property manager we were interviewing, I said, what would you say is the number one thing that's negatively impacting our rental value for when we list it on the market? And she said the color.
Huh.
She said, this is a personal choice. And, it's something that is maybe a little bit out there that not everyone's going to like. And so if you find yourself in that situation where you're going from living in a house to converting it into really a business asset, you have to think about that and you have to kind of start to detach yourself emotionally from the home and make business decisions rather than personal decisions.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And yeah, I mean, it worked out well for us, I guess. But we didn't paint we never painted the house when we moved in. We kept it the color it was when we moved in. So maybe that wasn't a problem. But yeah, I think it's definitely sentimental for us. We raised our most of our kids. That was their first house, and I think it gave them some comfort knowing that we weren't selling the house and we were staying close. So they'll go by and see it every once in a while, and made it a little bit easier to move into that bigger house for the kids. We really enjoy being close by.
I want to talk about your kids for a second here. So, you mentioned to me before we hit record that you have 5 kids
Yep,
from ages 3 to age 13.
correct. Yeah.
And when you were working at Deloitte, you said there wasn't a lot of margin. You're busy raising a family. How have you balanced those 2 goals of building wealth while also spending money on the things that are important to provide a good family life?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question. One thing, well, so my wife stays at home with the kids, so I'm the sole provider for um, income for the family. So you know, in some ways that saves money because we're not paying for childcare, we're not paying for a lot of different things. We don't eat out a lot. We're cooking meals at home and so on and so forth. Obviously, these days it's really expensive. Every time we go to take our kids to a restaurant, 70 to $100, it seems like, and we're not getting that much food. It seems it's not what it used to be. But I think the book Millionaire Next Door is one that I read when I was in college, and I really liked it. And one of the things that's really stuck with me, and my wife talks about it all the time as well, is that a lot of those people who became millionaires is because their spouses played good defense. It says, earning income is offense, so to speak, and then saving and not spending all of your money to, you know, get done the things you need to is defense. So my wife's pretty thrifty. She's actually really handy. And, we've done a lot of, over the years, we've done home improvement projects ourselves instead of hiring it out. We now tend to do a little bit more. We'll hire other people to do more things than we used to, but we would did tiling and demolition in our other property. And we've done things over the years where, used YouTube to learn how to do a lot of things. Yeah. We built cabinet doors and did some stuff like that that were probably saved us money, but made it nice. As far as, the kids go, yeah, I mean, family vacations are important to us. We go to California for spring break often, go to Utah in the summertime. We live in Arizona, so we'll almost always drive. We rarely fly. So, I mean, that's something that we'll save money. We'll do a lot of fun family things, but we're also, we're going to Utah. We're staying at my in-laws house. And so that saves money. So it's kind of, finding that balance of, all right, it works out. They have, plenty of space for us and it's comfortable and we're able to get out of the Arizona heat for most of July and make great memories and, with grandma, grandpa and cousins and so forth. But it's just one of those things that, yeah, you have to find a balance. So I think it's, my wife is, you know, great at finding, she enjoys it. I think it's a hobby of hers, thrifting and, she'll go to Goodwill and find stuff that, is pretty cheap and, she still does it. She doesn't have to anymore. Like it's not the same as when we were first married and it's probably a little more the only way to get something new, but she'll find some really nice things for a really good price and it's finding the value, I think,
Yeah, there's always ways to I almost call it when I look at making a financial decision, one of the most expensive premiums that you'll ever pay is for convenience. With almost any purchase that you make, there's like the convenient option that costs about 3 times as much as the option that's still gonna fit your need, but just requires a little bit more effort. And I think the easiest example is like DoorDash, right? Like, of course, something that might cost $15 at the restaurant is gonna cost like 45 once you add all the tips and fees with DoorDash. But that same principle is true in so many different areas of our finances where it's like maybe you have to pick your battles and choose the ones that are going to move the needle the most for you. But you can always find those areas where a little bit of extra effort will save you a lot of money and go a long way.
for sure.
I like what you said about vacations. And as my wife and I are kind of moving into that phase where we're a little more grounded with kids at home, we've noticed that our vacations are slowly shifting more towards visiting family and less from, just me and my wife traveling together. So my parents live in Texas. I'm in Arkansas. Last time we were in Texas, I joked with my dad. I said, "Dad, it's cheaper for us to come on vacation than it is for us to live at home because when we're here hanging out with you, visiting grandma and grandpa for our kids, I don't have to pay any of the utilities. I just turn it down really low. You're cooking all the food for us. Like, this is nice. We just pay for gas and then it's a week of life that's free."
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it works out. Yeah, it does work out nicely that you can actually save some money on vacation if you do it that way. Yeah, I agree. Especially if you're able to. Yeah, we have a relatively cheap. I mean, the utility bills in the summer in Arizona are pretty high. Our electricity bill, and for that month when we're usually gone, it's a couple $100 lower. So yeah, it saves a lot just from those little things. So at least I don't know if we're saving money because of everything else, but at least it's kind of balanced out.
Yeah. At what age did you first become a millionaire?
Uh, 37, about 3 years ago.
Nice. You hit it before 40. That's
Yeah.
awesome. And as you look back, so, maybe you started your career kind of in your early 20s, over the last 15 years or so, what would you say has been the number one factor that has helped you to build wealth?
I mean, I think it goes back to just that consistency, consistent savings. Like I said, I was a little hesitant to start, but once I did, I was able to gain momentum. And as I started making more money, I probably increased the percentage of what I was. We didn't really change our lifestyle, I guess you would say. We stayed in the same house. We had the same cars. We went on the same vacations we were going. We probably added a few kids along the way. So outside of that, and it was relatively consistent, but the income increase. And so investing and saving that additional amount while kind of maintaining a base lifestyle that was enjoyable, but frugal, I think was the key. And then over time, you see the compounding growth of the stock market and so on year after year. It's really added up. And, you have some really good, the last 10 years, some really good years where it's been 20 plus percent gains in the market and stuff like that, and not too many down years. And I think it's just kind of that momentum flywheel effect, if you will, where once you get it going, it just keeps going and can almost become self-sustaining at some point. I mean, I'll continue investing, but I imagine that if I stopped now, the investments would continue to grow, and I probably would be in pretty good shape for retirement. But no need to stop now, keep going. But yeah, I mean, over the years, it's also been, we spend more money than we used to. We go on a little bit nicer vacations. My wife and I went on a cruise last year, and we've done some things like that we hadn't done before. So um, it's a process.
Yeah, thinking about this idea of balancing increasing your lifestyle with making financial progress, I am someone that very much wants to increase my lifestyle. I think that's fun and it's part of living is, experiencing new things. And so one thing that I keep in the back of my mind is what I consider the 5-year delay. And it's like if I look at my life and look at how much income am I making right now, what's my financial situation? If I can just live the way I did 5 years ago, then I can always be increasing my lifestyle as I go along. But the idea is that, my lifestyle is just slightly behind where my financial growth is. And so I'm continuing to make progress towards those goals. And I'll give you an example of how I did this in my own life. I think it was 2018 or 2019 when I bought my first smartphone, and I bought a used iPhone 8 Plus for $500 off of Facebook Marketplace, from this guy at like we met up at the mall, and he brought the phone, I brought the cash, and we just traded. And I kept that phone until the very end of this year. So here we are coming into 2026, and I just barely upgraded my cell phone. So it's been 7 years that I've had the same iPhone. And this one, same thing. I bought it used for almost exactly the same price, about $500 off of Walmart. This time they sell like refurbished iPhones. And what's crazy is the phone I have right now is light years ahead of anything that was even available on the market five
Yeah,
years ago.
sure.
And I try and think of that. It's like whatever I have today is light years ahead of what was available 10 or 20 years ago anyways. So I don't always need the cutting edge, technology or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I agree with you. And I've done similar. I think, yeah, I had my last phone probably for 5 years. I'm on this one probably over 3 years now. And, it works okay. It's fine. And I would say, you apply that to something like a vehicle is something where, not getting, I mean, that's something that, has worked out for us. We've purchased our vehicles with cash, haven't taken out loans. We've, you know, basically so far 2 cars, we basically had them until one was, it was, well, we got a minivan when we got more kids, but I gave my car to my sister in college and probably last another year. And then I had another car that was totaled in an accident and, so on. And so, just not buying new cars, every couple of years and having nice, reliable vehicles. And, if you think about it, backup cameras and all the nice features that, that my cars have, even my, our Honda Odyssey minivan, it's over 8 years old. It has a lot of, has a DVD player, has all these things that, I never had as a kid growing up. And, it's really nice. We have really nice vacations for our kids love the car rides because of that. So works out.
That's fun. Have you ever experienced some sort of financial setback along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the biggest one is about 2 years ago, I was laid off from my job. It was, the company was struggling. I was the controller, so I could kind of see it coming, and was laid off. And, that's something where before something like that happens to you, you imagine worst case scenarios, and that can be a really scary thing. I think I mentioned my wife a couple weeks before it happened. I gave her a heads up that something might happen, and she probably got a little nervous, but it happened. And I I learned a lot about myself from the experience. First of all, I was grateful for, having some cash set aside in the savings account. And then knowing, okay, the backup plan, I have some money in an HSA that I actually have paid for medical expenses, but didn't use the HSA for it. So I could draw on that if I needed to. I really needed to a lot of Roth IRA investments over the years, and, pull out the principal that you invest in those Roth IRAs if you need to. And I ultimately didn't have to do any of that. I think the biggest thing was just my professional development. I hustled hard. I talked to probably 30 different, recruiters, and talked to a lot of people. And ultimately I was able to find a job. I think I was only 8 days without work. And
Wow.
I mean, I think it goes a lot to the value of being a CPA. And I had both, experience as a controller for a business as well as tax experience. So that, I think, combination was attractive in the marketplace. And professionals to lead accounting teams is a, I don't know, I guess it's a high demand area of hiring. And so, leaning on the professional network I had on LinkedIn and other places was really helpful. And, just relationships I had over the years. I talked to a lot of different people, and ultimately, yeah, in a way, I mean, I think I came out ahead. I had, yeah, because I was getting paid severance while also working at my new job for a time. So it worked out. I mean, but by no means do I, hope any that happens to anybody else. It's not a fun experience to be in. And, that first night, it was pretty sleepless and, pretty worrisome, trying to figure out what I was going to do. But, I did have a trust in God and faith that it would all work out, and it did. But I learned a lot from that experience, and I learned, okay, if something ever happens again, I have options and I have, backup plans. I think I can work through it. So it's something that gives me confidence. And, my dad went over it when I was a kid, or probably about 20. My dad was probably a year without a job. So I think that was probably part of what made it so scary in the beginning, is because I lived through it as a child. And it's hard, but it worked out for me, moving forward at this point.
Yeah. It's interesting how when you live by solid financial principles in your life, those what could be considered catastrophic scenarios where you get laid off and you lose your job end up becoming just speed bumps along the way where I'm sure it didn't feel like that in the moment. All the emotions are going through your mind. You mentioned the sleepless night after hearing the news, but in the back of your mind, you also know I have this HSA account I can dip into. I have this Roth IRA that I can pull out my contributions from over the years. Like, you were safe to say you were very far removed from a place where you couldn't feed your family or you were getting kicked out of the home that you lived. And so it just creates that security net and that buffer when you do experience those setbacks.
We had that rental property that we could have sold if we needed to, and some stuff like that that didn't have to, but at least it was all right. There's a plan for it. It's not going to be easy, but we could figure it out.
Yeah. I work with in my one-on-one financial coaching, I work with quite a few people that are interested in transitioning from a W-2 job into starting some sort of business, and they're looking for financial guidance along the way. And one thing that I always go through together with them is this idea of mapping out different levels of risk. And if you think of a situation like that where you get laid off, suddenly there's a big change to your financial situation. you have to start to map out these different critical points that you might reach. And it's like, okay, maybe first we have our emergency fund that's in a savings account. Then we have this HSA that I'm going to reimburse all our medical expenses we've accumulated over the years. Then I have the Roth IRA. Then I have selling the rental property. And once you've mapped out these different levels of risk, you have to decide, what am I comfortable with doing? And what am I not comfortable with? And that becomes your cutoff point where, just as in this example of losing your job, maybe you get to that point where you've drained the HSA, you're dipping into the Roth IRA, and you decide, okay, I'm willing to take a pay cut just to get a job in place. I'm not going to go for my top tier job anymore. I'm just going to go for what I can get quickly in place so that we can be earning income again.
Yeah, that's smart.
So, as someone who's a man of faith and then also a father and also one of the financial leaders of your home along with your wife, how would you say that your view of money has changed over time?
I mean, I think ultimately, um, I think it's a tool that can really help. Like I said, I think the investing aspect of it is probably what I've learned the most. And I'm looking forward. It's all right. How can I these multiple streams of income? A lot of people talk about that. I've got a few now with some investments in the stock market and yeah, future income with retirement accounts, the rental property, and so I think it's really just balancing all those things. But it's a tool. I do things like pay tithing, and that's important to me because that supports you know uh, the church that I attend, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter Day Saints, and I think that's you know really important. I think I believe and I know that there are blessings that come from doing that kind of thing as well. So ultimately, it's just something at the end of the day, it's a tool, and I want to do things like make memories. Childhood goes fast. And when you have kids, that are a bit younger than mine, but my as I said, my oldest daughter is 13, and all of a sudden there's only you know 5 6 years before she's going to be graduating and moving out of the house at some point and on to different things. I'm not going to see her as much, and so we're trying to make the most of use the tool to, all right, let's make sure we do some fun things with her, do some one-on-one trips with her, do these different things, plan out some things so that we're not regretting lost time. So it's ultimately, I mean, I think those are things that I've learned over the years, just probably trial and error, but those are some good principles, I think, with regard to money.
That's awesome. Well, Colson, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with me today. And looking back on our conversation, I think your story is inspirational because it shows that you don't necessarily have to have some sort of, flashy business that you own or risky investments to create a good life. You can master the foundational principles, the fundamentals of building wealth, and put yourself in a very good position where you have that opportunity to be more present with your kids and really start to craft the life that you want to live. So thank you for sharing your story and for being open. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you, Jackson.
Thanks for watching. If you made it to the end of this video, you must have liked it. So hit subscribe and I'll see you in the next one.